Cheap carbon wheels look cool, but there's also a host of other benefits to riding them. Seeing as they're one of the most popular upgrades for people to make on their road bikes, I wanted to do a video on this topic. And luckily, I'm friends with an engineer who also makes carbon wheels. So over to Dov. First question is, are they faster?
Yes.
Yeah, but why?
So if you think about a bike wheel pushing through the air, the first thing that's going to hit the air as you're moving forward is the front of the tyre. So the wind and the airflow comes in through the front, hits the front of the tyre and is split. What you want to be doing is trying to keep that airflow nice and smooth. So what we would call laminar, which means moving in a straight line, because that's nice and slippery, nice and aerodynamic. The last thing that you want is turbulence. So that's when air is moving around what you think of as dirty air, because that's what creates drag. So we need to take the airflow coming in from the tyre and try and recapture it. So you want a nice smooth surface to allow the air to rejoin and flow off the back of it. With a shallow rim, you don't have much space or time in which to do that. So you'll get the airflow coming in, hits the front of the tyre, comes off the back of the rim, it's still turbulent. On a deep rim, you see the airflow comes in through the front, hits the tyre, runs along the rim. You've got a lot more time to recapture the air. So this allows the airflow to come together, get nice and laminar, rejoin at the back of the rim, flows off the back, nice and smooth. It's not so turbulent, reduces drag.
Okay, but how fast do I actually need to ride to benefit from them?
I think that's the $1 million question. And there is a little bit of a myth out there that says there is this magic number that you have to achieve before an aero wheel really makes sense for you. And I suppose the genesis of that is the stat that people throw around, that at 15 kilometers an hour or about 9 miles an hour, that's the point at which half of the force that you're trying to overcome is aero drag. If you look above that, what's really important to remember is that of that force you're trying to overcome, things like rolling resistance, so the friction between the tyre and the ground, that's linear. So by that I mean, if you double your speed, you double your rolling resistance. Aero drag is not like that. That's actually a cubic relationship. So if you double your speed, you actually increase the aero drag that you're trying to overcome by a factor of 8. So above 15 kilometers an hour, it becomes almost exponentially more important to be reducing your drag. But then at the same time, you've also got to remember that if you're talking about racing over a fixed distance, because let's face it, most of us are thinking about this in a race context or an event context, you're trying to cover a fixed distance. Now, if you're doing that at 15 kilometers an hour, you're going to be out there for a lot longer than somebody who's out there riding at 30 kilometers an hour. And even though you might not be benefiting so much, you're benefiting for longer. There is an argument, and having run the numbers, we can say this, that if you're riding at what we would think of as an average bike speed, so say between 10 to 50 kilometers an hour, you can say that no matter what speed you're riding within that range, you're roughly speaking going to be saving the same amount of time over a fixed distance. So actually, I would argue that it doesn't matter what speed you're riding at, you're still going to save time.
Okay, well how much will it actually save me in terms of power and time?
So if you take the most extreme comparison, where we take a standard alloy rim versus our deepest section wheel. So this is actually a new prototype that we're working on, going to sit in the lineup as a TT triathlon wheel. The actual difference between these two we've tested at, and it's just under 16 watts. And that's 16 watts riding at 30 miles an hour. But if we flip that into time savings, which is more broadly speaking the same regardless of your speed, you'd be saving 49 to 50 seconds, so just under a minute, over a 40-kilometer ride. If you go for a slightly shallower wheel, the time savings will be slightly less. But again, it's worth remembering that it's not just a case of a wheel half the depth saves you half the amount of time. There is a bit more nuance to it than that, but we've got stats and data for every wheel in our particular lineup on the website. And we try to present it in a number of different ways, both in terms of watt savings, but also time savings, because I think ultimately that's what people are interested in. And obviously it's worth remembering that that's numbers just for a single wheel. We're talking about front wheels here. So clearly you're most likely to be upgrading both front and rear wheels. It's not always as simple as your time savings for front and rear is 1 + 1 = 2. Your rear wheel is going to be in a slightly different airflow state. And what I mean by that is by the time the air hits the rear wheel, it will have already come over the front wheel, your rider's legs, the frame. So it's going to be in a different state. So when we're testing for time savings, for watt savings, we have to consider that in terms of what type of air conditions you're having at the rear. Broadly speaking, if you're talking about saving, in this case, 49 seconds over 40 kilometers for the front wheel, if you add in a similar rear wheel, then you're probably talking about going from about 1:30 in terms of your overall savings. So over 40 kilometers, that's not insignificant. Flipping around, of course, if you were going to ride an alloy wheel set over the same 40 kilometers, in order to ride at the same speed, you would have to be outputting 25 to 30 watts more.
That's a lot of watts. Imagine trying to add that to your FTP.
Yeah.
What about the extra weight compared to a shallow wheel? Because it's a big piece of carbon.
Well, it's a piece of carbon, but that's the first thing to remember. So if you're thinking about upgrading from an alloy wheel set, like I'm holding here, to a deep section carbon wheel, actually carbon is a much lighter material. So even though there's more of it, it won't necessarily weigh a whole lot more. The difference in weight between these two wheels is less than 50 grams. Now, obviously, if we're talking about upgrading from a shallow carbon wheel to a deeper carbon wheel, then yes, there's going to be a bigger weight difference, up to something like 200 grams is possible. What you've really got to think about is what are you saving from a lower weight versus what are you giving up in terms of the aerodynamics. And it's important to remember that think about the break point where it's worth being lighter versus being more aero. For a trained cyclist, so call it a 300 watt FTP, you're talking about a gradient of something like an Alpe d'Huez climb before weight becomes more important than aerodynamics. Whereas for us mere mortals, so call it an FTP around 200, the gradient goes down to more like a box hill type gradient. So still a not insignificant climb. And of course, you've got to remember that that's only for the uphill section. As much as you're saving a little bit on the uphill, you're giving away huge amounts on the downhill and even the flat. The trade-off might make sense for a hill climb, but in the vast majority of situations, aerodynamics is going to win out.
All right, one last question. Is it really worth it?
I mean, I'm going to say it depends, right? It depends entirely what you're looking to get out of your riding. So if you're racing, then yes, 100% it's worth it. If you're bike packing and touring, it's up to you. Depends if you want to get there a little bit quicker or be able to enjoy riding a little bit faster. There are obviously other ways that you can get faster that may be a little bit cheaper. From where we're sitting in terms of an upgrade to your bike, I would argue that a performance wheel set is going to be one of the biggest changes that you can make in terms of getting faster.
So I think it's fair to say, like with a lot of tech in cycling, it all depends on what your goals are. Do you want to go faster? In which case, yes, generally speaking, a set of deep wheels is going to make you faster compared to the shallow equivalent. Bear in mind though, there's some cheaper ways you can get faster on the bike that you might want to look at first. For example, aero oversocks. They might be 20 or 30 pounds. Skin suit makes a massive difference compared to a normal jersey and shorts, even the tight fitting ones. Taping up vents in your helmet or wearing an aero helmet also goes a long way. Combining all of these things together with deep wheels as well is really going to make a massive difference. It can be 60, 70 watts if you're riding at race pace. Don't forget, you can even do things that don't cost anything at all, like riding in an aero position, getting narrower on the bike, getting your head down and training in that position so you can still do the same power. All of these things add up to making you a faster rider. Big thanks to Dob from Parcours for being involved in this video. If you want to check out his website, I'll put it in the link down below. He sponsors this channel. I ride his brilliant wheels. We've been friends for a long time. If you have any questions for him, please put them in the comment section down below. And if you have any big questions that might be more appropriate for a video, we'll be filming some more stuff in the future. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching and see you guys soon.